In 1961, President Kennedy called on all Americans to rise to the challenges of the day. He knew that success depended upon the unity of efforts throughout the federal government and the nation. In a memorandum he wrote, "I want coordination of government activities outside of Washington significantly strengthened across departments and agency lines." From this, federal executive boards were born. The Greater Boston Federal Executive Board, one of 28 across the country, fosters communication, coordination, and collaboration with federal, state, and local government agencies. It is our hope that through this series, folks will learn about the mission and work done by different agencies, what that means for our country, and more specifically, what that means to each of us as individuals. This is your federal government, and I am your host, Diane LeBlanc. Hello everybody. Today we are featuring the Passport Agency, which is part of the State Department. Our guests today are Tyrone Shelton, who is the Regional Director, and Pat Rourke and Nancy Jackson, who are Customer Service Managers at the Boston Passport Agency. Welcome to you all.
Thank you.
Very excited that you're here. Our agencies have worked very closely together over the years, and I know the work that you do, so it's going to be a great show.
Great.
Tyrone, I'm going to start with you.
Okay.
You are the Regional Director. Tell folks just what's the mission of your agency and what is your geographic area of responsibility?
Okay. Well, the mission of our office is to issue secure travel documents to U.S. citizens while providing great customer service with professionalism and integrity. And in doing so, we facilitate international travel and we help secure the U.S. border. The area of responsibility for our office, it covers all of New England, and so that incorporates about 1,100 employees who are responsible for issuing about 50% of all the U.S. passports issued in this country each year.
Wow. Now, in addition to the Boston office, what other offices are under your purview?
Well, there are also offices in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, New York City, going as far west as Detroit, Michigan, but also a new office in Buffalo, New York, as well as one of our newest offices in St. Albans, Vermont. So, you know, we have a very large territory. Here in the Massachusetts area, we have people coming to us from all over, literally from Rhode Island, all over New England. Some people actually get on planes and they come to the Boston agency to take care of their urgent travel needs. For those who are not traveling so urgently, we have over 325 passport acceptance facilities. Now, these are mainly post offices and clerk of court offices and some other municipal offices where people can go and apply for their routine passport needs. Now, eventually, all of that work, it gets processed at one of our other facilities. A lot of it comes to the Boston office, so they're working behind the scenes there. And we have pretty good turnarounds on those, so in generally about 2 weeks we're able to turn around those cases when they're urgent.
What percentage of American citizens actually have a passport?
Well, it's about 30% of Americans have passports now. A lot of this was brought about because of legislation changes. The Western Hemisphere Travel Initiative, which came about following 9/11, it requires individuals when they're coming back into the U.S. from Canada, Mexico, the Caribbean, and Bermuda to have a valid U.S. passport. So that essentially doubled our workload.
I say 9/11 really did change the world as we knew it, and it had a tremendous impact on many federal agencies. Clearly a great impact on your agency.
Well, it required us to go out and hire about twice as many people that we had on board at the time. It was a tremendous challenge, in particular around 2007 when we started implementing a lot of the legislative changes. But we focused on just trying to make the process much more secure, making sure that we could increase the points of service for our customers. We've expanded our nationwide network of passport facilities domestically. We have, as I mentioned, doubled the staff. We've incorporated new technology. So we're trying to make it a much more pleasant experience for everyone, and just to be able to deliver more secure services, and essentially just to make sure we can meet those travel needs.
And I think my personal observation is that you've succeeded in doing those things that you look to do. I remember, in years past, going into a building where there was a passport agency, and you would see long lines and people waiting, and you don't see that anymore. You really have taken advantage of the technology and different opportunities. Now, Pat, you and I have worked together for a long time.
Yes, we have.
Tyrone talked about the mission of the agency. What does that mean to the Boston Passport Agency in terms of your day-to-day responsibilities?
Well, it's our responsibility to look at every single passport application that comes into our office and scrutinize the documents that come with it to make sure that the documents are bona fide, that the people are U.S. citizens, and that they are who they claim to be by identification. We also have to check on different databases to see if the people that are applying are entitled to a passport. There are some legal technicalities where if certain monies are owed, child support, or if they have a government loan or anything, that the passport cannot be issued until these responsibilities on their part are met.
Okay. Now, Nancy, Tyrone talked about sort of the customer service mentality of the passport agency in broad terms. You're a customer service manager. What are your goals?
Our goal is to consistently and correctly and efficiently issue a passport book or a passport card to a U.S. citizen. And we do that through a variety of ways. We make sure that, number one, our customer service goal is to have enough acceptance facilities out there to accept an application. So as Tyrone mentioned, we have over 325 just in the Massachusetts area that allows people to go into their local community to apply for a passport book or a passport card. We also have what we call our National Passport Information Center, which is available. It's an 877 number, a toll-free number that is open to the public to be able to call that number from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. Each day, where they can have their questions answered. They can also make an appointment through that system 24/7. So they're available to actually come into our agency through appointment. And we also do, as Pat and I do, we do customer service outreach opportunities. We go to corporations to speak about passports and how to get a passport. We do trade shows. We also work with Citizens and Immigration Services and go to naturalization ceremonies.
Okay. So Pat, you talked about some of the review that your office does to make sure that folks are entitled to get a passport. Who can apply for a passport?
Anyone that is a United States citizen or national can apply for a U.S. passport, and they must present the evidence of their citizenship and also their identity when they submit the application.
Now, Nancy mentioned a passport book and a passport card. What's the difference?
Passport book, that's the prime document that we issue. That is good to get a United States citizen anywhere in the world that they will let them in and get a visa for. By any means of transportation. The passport card is something that came about as a result of the Western Hemisphere Travel Initiative. And that document is good for entering the United States back from Mexico, Canada, Bermuda, and some of the Caribbean region, but that's only by sea travel and land travel. You cannot get on a plane with a passport card.
So what's the process for actually getting a passport or a passport card? Is it different?
No, it's the same application. The passport card is adjudicated the same standard as the passport book. There's no shortcuts just because the card is less money and it doesn't take you be able to take you as many places by any means of transportation, the documentation is the same requirement.
Okay, so the difference is it costs less.
It costs less,
costs
and
less.
you cannot fly internationally with it.
So many of the services now provided by different levels of government, there's a fee for them. There's a fee that helps defray the cost of providing that service. And I know that fees are subject to change, but what are the current costs of a passport?
Okay, the current cost for a passport for a first-time adult over the age of 16 years of age is $135. That's for routine service, which takes 4 to 6 weeks from the time of application till the time they receive the document in the mail. The passport card for an adult over 16 is $55, and it's the same processing time.
So it's good for people to know the difference. They may not need that full-fledged passport book, and they can save some money and still travel to the parts that they want to travel to.
Absolutely, and the validity for an adult is 10 years.
Okay.
10 years from the date of issue. Minors, the fee for a passport book for a minor for the first time is $105, and the validity for those under the age of 16 is only 5 years as opposed to 10.
Okay. Now, what if you're renewing a passport? What are the differences?
Okay. If you qualify to use the passport by mail form, there's certain qualifications you need to meet. You have to have a fully valid passport book or passport card issued within the last 15 years. You had to have been over 16 when it was issued, and you need to be using the same name or present a certified documentation such as a court order or a marriage certificate showing the legal name change.
Let's talk a little bit more about the documentation that people need to provide in order to receive this benefit. Because that's where our offices, my office, the National Archives and Records Administration, has worked with your office for folks who are trying to prove that they're a citizen, a naturalized citizen, and they've lost their paperwork from the Citizenship and Immigration Services. And so sometimes they end up with us trying to go into the old records to be able to prove that they are entitled. But what are the specific documents that help them to demonstrate to you?
Well, most people born in the United States, they have their certified U.S. birth certificate, and then they have the certificates of naturalization, certificates of citizenship that are issued by CIS, and then there's also the consular reports of birth. Some people gain citizenship by birth abroad to 1 or 2 U.S. citizen parents, and that birth is usually filed at the nearest U.S. embassy or consulate, and they're issued a certificate of birth abroad. But for those folks who have lost their naturalization certificates, or and usually these are older folks that you really want to help. I mean, but I've worked with you in many specific situations that your agency has come up with stuff that goes back, naturalization of people's parents in the 1920s, and listing them as like age 1 or 2 years old, residing with their parents in Massachusetts, and that's helped. It shows that they were citizens by virtue of the naturalization of their parents, and that they were lawfully admitted to the United States. They're here. So a document listing all that with certificate numbers and everything would help them immensely for the issuance of the passport.
And again, we appreciate all the service that you've provided to us over the years. Now, you mentioned the typical turnaround time for receiving a passport. What if somebody needs it more quickly? I know that there's an expedited service option.
Yes, there is.
And how much does that cost?
That costs $60 per application, and it cuts down the processing time. It's 4 to 6 weeks for routine. Expedite processing is 2 to 3 weeks from the date of application. For those traveling in less than 2 weeks, they can make an appointment at one of our agencies to come in and be seen in person.
Okay. So Nancy, let's talk about that. We've talked about all of these locations across the Commonwealth, across the Northeast and across the country, post offices and whatnot that really support what you do. But when would somebody actually need to physically come in to the Boston Passport Agency, and what would that look like? What can they expect?
Okay. Usually somebody who we see at the Boston Passport Agency is somebody who is traveling within the next 14 business days. They then can call, as I said, our number, make an appointment, scheduled to come in. They'll be given a confirmation number. When they arrive at the Boston Passport Agency, they will check in first thing. They'll give us their confirmation number, and they'll tell us that they're here and what their reasons for. Maybe they're having emergency travel. Some people have an expired passport and they have a business trip and they didn't realize that they needed to go so quickly. We will, at our check-in area, make sure that they have all the completed application and all the documents that they need to have to be able to see a passport specialist. Then the passport specialist will review their application right then and there, go over everything, check their citizenship evidence, their identification, make sure they have the fees that Pat was talking about that are available. We take cash, credit, check any which way, and then we actually adjudicate the application at that moment and talk to the customer about when they need their passport. So if a person is traveling rather quickly, we will be able to issue them a passport in 24 to 48 hours and make sure that they can meet their travel plans.
So what type of volume are we talking about? On any given day, how many of those situations is your office likely to be dealing with?
Well, for the Boston agency, on an average day, we're seeing over 100 people, 150 people.
Wow. And what are some of the really more urgent situations that you might be able to tell us about?
We've had I guess Boston has had the honor of actually being able to assist a lot of different people in a lot of different ways. We unfortunately have a lot of life and death situations where people have come into us, walked in, do not have an appointment, visit us in what we call our will call room and explain to us their situation, and we obviously want to help those people as best we can, so we see them right away. We've also had calls from our congressional offices where we've had elderly people who would like to go to their home country and before they pass away or something, and we've helped them in a variety of situations. We get calls from the local hospitals where we have infants who may be ill, and they've asked us to actually come, maybe even to the hospital, to assist the parents so that they can take their child home. So we've actually done outreach, and we've gone out to the hospitals, or we've had people come into our office, and we help that way.
Wow. And how long have you had this outreach program to the community?
The outreach program, I think, has been gone on for quite a long time with the Boston Passport Agency. I think we're just a little bit more vocal about it at this point, and we are trying to make ourselves more known in the community so that we can be more assistance.
Excellent. Are there any special tips that you can give to folks to help them get through the process more smoothly? And either one of you can take that question.
Well, the first thing I think if you're coming into the agency is to always have, you can download your application from our website, travel.state.gov. So it's nice to come in with a completed application so that you're not taking the extra time there of having to fill one out. One of our biggest dilemmas is the photo. So it's always good to have a very good photo, a 2x2 photo. We only ask for one to go along with your application, and that is really critical. A lot of the delays in our passport applications is because the photo may be too grainy, it may be blurry, it's too large, it's too small. So we ask them, and that information is also on our website of what is a good quality photo.
So for those folks who come in with the urgent emergency situation, and they come in to the Boston office, which is located where?
At the Tip O'Neill Building, 10 Causeway Street in Boston.
Okay. So do you take that photo, or do you send them down the road a piece and tell them where to go?
We do ask them to bring the photo with them. There are a variety of places close by in the vicinity of our building that they can take photos.
Okay, all right. So Tyrone, I know that within your area of responsibility, you have the National Passport Center in Portsmouth, New Hampshire.
Sure.
What is unique about the National Passport Center versus a passport agency such as the Boston Passport Agency?
Well, the thing that is unique about the National Passport Center is that it literally handles work from all over the world. So unlike the Boston office, where there are more than 100 people every day coming in to apply, the National Passport Center primarily focus, I would say 99.99% of its work is coming from locations from elsewhere in the country or overseas. There's a very small public counter whereby people can apply there, and it would be only for emergency purposes where people are traveling within the 14 business days. But the National Passport Center, it really focuses on all types of work from all around the country. It handles all of the expedited requests where people don't have to appear in person at an office like Boston, but they instead applied at their local post office or clerk of court, but they still needed to have the passport urgently. That work eventually gets processed by the National Passport Center, and they'll turn those cases around in about 3 business days from the time they receive them.
Very quickly.
Yes.
Now, I know that the Passport Agency also provides services to travelers when they're out of the country. What are some of those services?
Well, and it's one of the reasons that we have our passport fees. It's not just to cover the cost of the actual passport book and running the facilities here domestically. We have 28 facilities here domestically that help in the processing of passports, but also overseas. We provide services to American citizens. If they are registered with the embassy or the consulate abroad, we'll know where they are. So if there's some emergency that occurs and there needs to be an evacuation of some sort, then the State Department is charged with locating those American citizens, whether they're registered or not. But if they're registered, it's a lot easier for us to figure out where they are and to notify their loved ones back here. So if someone is abroad and they happen to get arrested, the State Department, we are there to provide support for them, to do the visits to them while they're in jail, to facilitate getting their families to those locations. If someone has a birth abroad and they need to register that birth to demonstrate that that person is a U.S. citizen, we again have the ability for people to apply for a passport overseas. They can apply for a birth registration abroad. If there's a death abroad, any sort of vital services, the State Department is there to provide those when someone is overseas.
So what are the other federal agencies that you maintain close working relationships with, or other levels of government?
Sure. Well, on the front end of our process, I mentioned the network of acceptance facilities that certainly work with us, so primarily on a state or local level, but we also have some other federal entities that work with us there as well. But federal law enforcement, their involvement with the State Department, it's huge in our mission to make sure that we've properly identified all of our customers. If we need to have any sort of support on the state level, again, those law enforcement entities, they work closely with us. The United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, we work very closely with them through the naturalization process. We often partner on naturalization ceremonies whereby new citizens, they are being presented their naturalization certificates, and then the natural thing to do is to want to travel, and the way you travel is with the U.S. passport. So that's a very strong relationship that we continue to maintain.
One of the shows that we've taped recently as part of this series was with Diplomatic Security, and they talked about actually their role in passport fraud related cases, and I'm guessing that passport fraud is obviously a big concern of yours as well.
They are our close partners. We have 3 primary functions, within our process. We want to make sure that the cases are adjudicated properly, that we have determined proper citizenship and identity. We want to deliver great customer service, and we want to make sure that those few individuals who want to perpetrate fraud, that we can detect them as best we can. And our Office of Diplomatic Security, they are our partners, close partners in helping to investigate any sort of fraudulent activities. And then they reach out, of course, to any number of other law enforcement entities to help them in their work too.
So, let me see who I'm going to go to next. I'm going to go to Pat.
Okay.
How many years have you been with the agency?
I've completed 39.
Wow.
I'm into my 40th, yes.
Good for you. Why did you pick this agency, and talk a little bit about your career path?
Way back when, in 1973, I took a civil service exam where I had to go into the John F. Kennedy building and take a typing test on an old manual typewriter, it wasn't even electric, and fill out a multiple choice, just general knowledge question. Someone would say it was like Trivial Pursuit. And then they offered me a job, and I showed up, and I started off as a clerk typist. I worked there, and then after 5 years as a clerk typist, I worked my way up, and then I applied for a job of a passport specialist. And I worked at that from 1978 until about like 1982, and then I became a supervisor, and I did that for quite some time. And then when the availability came up for the customer service manager, I applied for that, and I've been customer service manager in Boston since 2005.
And it's a perfect position for you,
Oh,
because I
thank you,
know that you
Diane.
love it, and the customers love you.
I really do love helping people. That's what makes life worthwhile. It really is. When you can help someone through a situation that they think is insurmountable, that they'll never get it, and they're really, really despondent, when you're finally able to get the pieces together and they get their passport, I mean, just the look on their faces pay enough for anybody. It really is.
Nancy, how about you?
I have been with the Passport Agency since 2006. I actually started there as their processing supervisor on the contracting side, and then transferred over 2 years later to the federal side as a supervisor, and have been in the customer service position for about a year now, working with Pat, and it has been a great experience for me. For myself, I enjoy also helping everybody, and as Pat said, the smile on somebody's face at the end of the day, when you can hand them that passport at 4 p.m. when we hand out passports, it just makes a world of difference to know that you really help somebody go somewhere, and anywhere in the world. It's their gold ticket to go anywhere in the world.
Nice.
So it's exciting.
And I mean, most of us, when we hear about people applying for a passport, we think it's for travel, for enjoyment, for vacation. Right. But some of those situations, those emergency situations, life or death situations, that you deal with on a regular basis. We don't often think about that level of service being provided.
And we've also helped people where they're not traveling at all, but they need their passport. They need to show proof of citizenship for a job employment, and also for insurance purposes. So we've gone out, in many cases, we actually had a case where we had to go to the hospital and help this person get their passport because they needed proof of citizenship for their insurance company and for their hospital bills to be paid.
Wow.
So it isn't, like you said, it isn't always for travel.
Sure.
Tyrone, your turn.
Right. Well, I, interestingly enough, started my career with the State Department as a summer intern, my last year of college, and began working with Passport Services almost 20 years ago as a passport specialist in Washington, D.C., and I had the opportunity to perform a number of different jobs at our Passport Services headquarters. I have served as special assistant for the passport office. I had a chance to open the Charleston Passport Center as their adjudication manager for a couple of years, and then came here to New England to work in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, in a few different capacities. First as assistant director of the National Passport Center, then as director, and now in my capacity as Northeast Regional Director. It's been a wonderful experience. I think that New England has some of the most intelligent, some of the hardest working folks in our entire network, and perhaps that's why so much of the work comes this way.
You know, and I've also had the pleasure of working with some of the folks who work out of New Hampshire, and they also have just been a pleasure and a joy to work with. And I want to thank you for your efforts and your leadership to the federal community. at large. You do a lot to support the federal workforce in this area, and we're glad you're in the Northeast region, and we want you to stay there.
Thank you.
All right, so what have I not asked that you think the folks at home need to know?
Well, I think some people are interested in knowing how to get a job with us.
That's a great thing. How would somebody go about getting a job with you?
I personally would recommend that if someone's still in college, one of the best things they can do is to pursue internships. You know, and they happen in many different formats. Some are just for the summer. Others are in what's called a federal intern program, whereby if they can stay in school but also work with a federal agency, it allows them the opportunity to be eligible for conversion into a permanent position following graduation. So I think that's a great way to get in for those who are still in school. And then for those who are out of school, you know, there are, you know, a number of initiatives out there available on usajobs.gov that, you know, would allow people to apply for the different positions. We quite frequently have our jobs posted for our various locations around the country, again on usajobs.gov.
Excellent, excellent advice. I too started as a student, and it is a wonderful, wonderful way to enter the federal workforce. Anything else?
I would say plan ahead. A lot of the people that are in our counter are in a stressful situation, and a lot of times they are in that situation because they planned their trip but forgot to look at their passport. So if they can plan that trip, and it's such an exciting thing to do, just take that extra couple seconds to look at your passport and make sure it's not expired, or make sure that if you need a passport, and avoid the $60 expedite fee if you plan ahead.
And that's great advice. I know a lot of times children will give their parents a gift of a trip for a special anniversary. On more than one occasion, I've had people come to me to say, our 50th anniversary, our kids gave us this trip. We don't have passports. So they need to be thinking about those kinds of things. Yeah, Pat, any?
The only other thing I can say is if a whole family got a passport, if you're planning another trip, take a good look at the documents. Just remember that the children's passports under the age of 16, they're only valid for 5 years, not 10. I mean, just this past Monday, we had a father in there with 2 of the children, and there was a family of 6 going. Mom left with the 2 kids whose passports were good, and Dad was left behind with the 2 younger ones to get passports for them. And because of the consent issues, it was a delay because we had to wait for Mom to get to the embassy down there to get us a notarized consent form, because children under the age of 16 need the consent of both parents in order to have a passport issued.
You know, and speaking about children, I mean, very, very small children, you need to sign a passport. How does that work if, you know, if it's a 1-year-old or an infant or?
Mom or Dad usually signs on the line and puts mother or father afterwards, yes.
All right, excellent. Well, that's great. I want to thank you all for being here with us. I think we've provided folks with good information, and I want to thank everybody at home for watching. I hope that you learned more about the work of the Passport Agency, and I hope that you will continue to join us as we feature other federal agencies on your federal government.